If you enjoy stories where karma strikes back harder than anyone expects, make sure to stick around till the end. And don't forget to subscribe for more jaw-dropping tales of revenge, survival, and sweet justice, because this one starts with a screaming WA president named Karen and ends with me holding the deed to the very property she thought she controlled, becoming her landlord and watching her world unravel before my eyes. So buckle up, because this ride is filled with betrayal, secrets, shocking twists, and a payoff you won't want to miss. When I first drove back into the small suburban neighborhood I hadn't seen since childhood, I never expected the chaos that would unfold. My grandfather's land had always been a place of warmth and memories for me, a sprawling patch of greenery in the middle of neatly packed houses, but after he passed away and left it to me, I became the new owner without realizing that the WA, led by the infamous Karen, had been circling like vultures trying to force my grandfather into selling. Karen was the kind of person you could hear before you saw, her shrill voice echoing across fences as she yelled at kids for riding bikes too fast, or berated neighbors about the color of their shutters, and the moment my truck rolled into the driveway with my name on the deed in my glove compartment, she stormed out of her oversized McMansion, clipboard in hand, and announced that outsiders weren't welcome without WA approval, to which I calmly replied that as the legal heir to the land, not only was I not an outsider, but technically, given the zoning and easement rights, I was about to become her landlord. The look on her face was priceless, but it was only the beginning of a war that would stretch across months of manipulation, sabotage, and shocking revelations. She tried to hand me a thick packet of WA rules and fines the very first night, demanding a signature, but I refused, pointing out that my grandfather's property was never annexed into the WA because he refused to sign decades ago, making my land sovereign in a sea of cookie-cutter conformity. And that little fact made Karen seethe, because without my land under her control, she couldn't complete her grand plan to bulldoze and turn the whole neighborhood into a gated luxury development that would line her pockets. Of course, I only discovered that part later, after enduring weeks of her harassment, anonymous complaints to City Hall, bogus citations, even hiring people to trespass and inspect my home. But every move she made only gave me more ammunition. The first big twist came when I was digging through my grandfather's old files in the attic and found a series of letters from Karen herself, begging him to sell years ago and threatening him when he refused, which revealed a pattern of bullying that stretched back decades, and I realized she wasn't just an annoying neighbor, she was a predator who believed she owned everything around her. Determined not to back down, I started renovating the old farmhouse on the land, turning it into a mix of rustic charm and modern resilience, which drove Karen mad because construction trucks rolled in daily, disrupting her precious WA-approved aesthetic. And when she tried to fine me, I publicly exposed at a town meeting that my property wasn't part of her jurisdiction, holding up the original county records and watching her face turn red as the council confirmed my independence. But that victory was only round one, because Karen wasn't about to let her control slip away that easily. And she escalated with dirty tricks, poisoning my grandfather's old oak tree with chemicals, slashing my tires at night, even filing a fake noise complaint that got the police called on me, except when the officers showed up and saw her yelling at me on my porch while I was quietly reading inside. They started building their own thick file on her antics. The second twist hit when I dug deeper into property records and discovered something incredible. Karen's own house, the one she bragged about being the crown jewel of the neighborhood, was built on a portion of land that technically still belonged to my grandfather's estate, meaning she had been living partially on land she didn't own. And when the inheritance transferred to me, that sliver came with it. I triple-checked with lawyers, and sure enough, her pool, her fancy patio, and even part of her kitchen extended into my property line by several feet, which meant with one filing I could demand rent or even force her to demolish and move her structures. And when I confronted her with the survey maps, the color drained from her face as she realized the tables had turned completely. But Karen wasn't done. She tried to blackmail me with fabricated photos claiming my construction violated codes. She tried to rally other WA members to sign petitions against me, but many of them were secretly tired of her tyranny and began slipping me information, revealing how she had embezzled WA funds for years and used intimidation to silence dissent. So I carefully gathered evidence, documenting every misstep, until I had a case strong enough to present at the annual WA meeting where, in front of dozens of neighbors, I revealed not only her corruption but also the truth that her property sat illegally on mine. The room exploded with whispers and gasps, And for the first time Karen had no words, her clipboard dangling from her hands like a useless shield. The third twist came from a letter my grandfather had left sealed in his desk, addressed to me, explaining that he had always known Karen was crooked but wanted me to decide the future of the land. Inside was also the original deed showing an easement agreement that gave whoever owned our land limited landlord rights over the HOA common areas that encroached onto our property line. In short, I wasn't just her landlord for her encroaching patio. I had legal leverage over parts of the HOA's shared space, meaning their pool and playground technically required my permission to exist where they were, and suddenly I wasn't just a thorn in Karen's side, I was her worst nightmare with paperwork to prove it. When I exercised my rights by issuing a formal notice demanding rent from the HOA for use of my land, chaos erupted. Neighbors turned on Karen, blaming her for never resolving the land disputes, and when the city got involved, it was discovered that Karen had falsified multiple documents during her tenure as HOA president, leading to an official investigation. I thought she'd finally back down, but instead she tried one last desperate move. She offered me a massive cash bribe to quietly sell the land and leave, but by then, I had grown attached to restoring my grandfather's legacy and exposing her for who she really was, so I refused, and that refusal drove her over the edge. She vandalized my property, spray painting threats on my barn, but I had security cameras rolling, and when I handed the footage to the police, she was arrested and charged with destruction of property and harassment. Her carefully curated image as the perfect neighborhood queen shattered overnight. Neighbors she once ruled with fear now avoided her, whispering behind her back. And when her trial exposed not only her crimes but also the fact that she had been pocketing HOA dues for years, she was removed from her presidency and forced to pay restitution. The final twist, the sweetest of all, came when her house went into foreclosure because of the legal fees and fines piling up. And guess who swooped in to buy the property at auction? That's right, me, the very person she tried to drive away, now holding the keys to her former kingdom, turning her into my tenant when she tried to negotiate staying in her home as a renter. I agreed under one condition. She would sign a legally binding document acknowledging me as her landlord and relinquishing any future claims against my land. And though she signed with shaking hands and tears in her eyes, I knew justice had been served. Today, I live on my grandfather's restored land, the farmhouse thriving, the fields blooming, while the neighborhood enjoys peace without Karen's dictatorship. And every month when the rent check arrives from the woman who once tried to destroy me, I'm reminded that sometimes the best revenge is patience, persistence, and letting karma deliver its blows in due time. And that's why you should subscribe right now if you loved this story, because trust me, there are more tales of poetic justice, revenge, and unexpected twists coming that you won't want to miss.